y'all, this is Kayla with Live Oak Nest. Welcome back. I'm glad you're here today. So I want to share with you how to make these book stacks. They're very simple to make and they are so cute. I love how they turned out. So you're going to need just a couple of things. You're going to need some paperback books with the cover torn off, some graphics that have been printed on laser paper, and some Mod Podge, and an X-Acto knife. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm just going to trim off a little bit of the excess paper from my graphic just so it's a little bit easier to work with while I'm trying to line it up to my books. And you'll notice if you download the file that I have, I did several tulips and bird nest and bunnies, and I did horizontal and vertical images, so you could do your book stacks laying down horizontal like this, or you could stand them up and have them have the graphic vertical up and down. So one thing I figured was easiest to do was to hot glue the books together. It just kind of helps keep them in place when you're trying to line up your image. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to run a bead of hot glue on the books and stack them up. And when you're doing this, you want to try and not get it really close to the spine, because when you run your X-Acto knife down the spine to cut your paper, if you have a bunch of glue balled up there, it's going to make it a little bit challenging to get it cut and make it look smooth. So once you get your books glued together, you could run some twine around it and wrap it if you felt like they were still kind of shifting on you. So that's what I did here. And I did several of these book stacks, and I don't think you would need to do this. I did it on the first few, and then I felt like I could kind of hold it better with my hands as I worked with it. So it's up to you whether you skip this step or not, but I just wanted to mention it in case it's helpful. So once you have that done, you'll see right here, I decided, like, my books were still kind of falling apart, and you want them nice and tight so that when you put your image on, and then you go to cut it, that the image doesn't have big gaps in between it from where you cut your paper. So I decided here to go ahead and run some more hot glue in between the books, but like I mentioned, just make sure you don't get it really close to the spine, because when you go and try and run your X-Acto knife down there, if it's catching on hot glue, it's not going to cut as nicely, and you won't get a really smooth finish like you want. So once you have that all ready to go, we're going to go ahead and put a thin coat of Mod Podge on the book spines, and you just want to try and do a thin, even coat. If you do too much, your paper might start kind of wrinkling on you. So we're just going to do a nice thin coat and smooth our image out really well. And here I'm just kind of lining my image up and making sure that it will fit where I want it on the books, so that it'll be kind of centered. So I have my Mod Podge on, so I'm going to grab my image and simply just lay it down where I want it to be on the spines. And so once you have it placed down, you want to take like another sheet of paper. That's what I found is easiest to smooth it all down really well. Sometimes another sheet of paper, it just glides a lot smoother than your hand does, so I found that's what works best. But you just want to smooth it down really well and take out any of like the air bubbles, smooth out any kind of globs of Mod Podge that you might have underneath so that it dries smooth. So once you've allowed that to sit and dry for 30 to 45 minutes, it's probably ready to go ahead and trim the excess paper off. So you'll notice when you start to try and trim it, if it's not a really clean straight cut, it's not dry enough yet, so let it sit a little longer. But all you're going to want to do is take your X-Acto knife and run it in between the spines of the book. So essentially this is where we're making the book stack look like, separate images stacked one on top of the other on the books. So right here I'm having a little bit of challenge getting my X-Acto knife in between the book stacks, and that's because I hot glued them too close together right there. So don't do what I did. If you're gonna hot glue your books, just keep your hot glue maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch away from where the spines meet, so that way you can just run your X-Acto knife through there really clean. Alright, so once you have the seams cut, the next thing you want to do is just trim off the excess paper. You could use scissors. I just found they were too bulky and I couldn't get like really up next to the book very well, so I just used my X-Acto knife to trim off all of it. So I just, with a steady hand, ran my X-Acto knife with light pressure so I wasn't cutting through the pages of the book, and just trimmed off the excess paper on the top and bottom, and then also on each end. So on this particular book stack where I had too much hot glue on the seam, I ended up just tearing the books apart where they were hot glued and cleaning up the seams so that it didn't look quite so messy. So I just teared them apart, used my X-Acto knife to trim where it was where there were just too much hot glue in between them, and then trimmed it off and then stacked them back up. So while my bird nest stack was drying, I went ahead and did another stack with this bunny rabbit. So I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm just going to share it with you so you can watch me. But I'm just going to cut down the spine and then clean up around the edges. And this one cut a lot smoother and cleaner than the other one, so I didn't have to take apart my book stacks and do all of that I did with the bird nest. But I wanted to share that with you so that you know, like, you can't really mess this project up. If you need to pull the books apart and trim off the paper, you can, or if you needed to just start completely over, I mean, that would be fine too. These books are less than $1, so it wouldn't be too big of an expense. So the last thing you want to do is just apply a thin layer of the Mod Podge on the images. I was just careful not to get too much in between the books. That way I didn't have, you know, dried clumps of Mod Podge that you could see when the books were stacked. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing with the bird nest stack. I'm just applying that final coat of Mod Podge, and then when I'm finished, I am going to, you could use twine, you could use a ribbon. I just used some ribbon that I had on hand, so I'm just going to tie a ribbon around them. You could also add like a faux tulip or a little sprig of greenery just to kind of, you know, give it a cute finishing touch. So that is all you need to do to put an image on a book stack. This DIY book stack project is so cute. I just love how these turned out. It's so simple and they would be great for any season. So picture doing like a pumpkin or an antique Santa or a vintage Christmas tree. I just think it would be so pretty. So I'm excited to see what I can do for the different seasons with this project. So thanks so much for watching. I'd love if you'd let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you again next week.